In this video, we'll be taking a closer look into the theory that Wardell Poochie Fouse was the hitman in Biggie's murder. You've heard the rumors, folklore, and speculation surrounding this man's name from all the different YouTube channels that have covered this topic in the past. But just how much do we actually know about Poochie, or how he even became a suspect in this case more than 5 years after the fact that he'd been dead? In 2006, Operation Transparency had been put together by the LAPD. Operation Transparency was a task force that was created after a lawsuit that was filed against the city of Los Angeles by Biggie's mom, Wallace. This lawsuit was filed based on the claims of cop involvement in the murder of Biggie by former LAPD detective Russell Poole. Poole's theory was that Suge Knight was behind the hit on Biggie, and a Nation of Islam associate, Amir Muhammad, was the triggerman with the help of corrupt LAPD cops, David Mack and Rafael Perez. If this theory had been proven to be true in court, the judge in the case at the time ruled that the city of LA would have to pay up to $400 million to Biggie's estate based on his estimated lifetime earnings. At one point during the civil trial, the LAPD had actually been caught concealing evidence that implicated the cops who were named in Poole's theory. The city had to pay the Wallace estate $1.1 million as a result of this. This led to the formation of the Operation Transparency Task Force by the department. This task force was comprised of investigators and agents from different departments and agencies. Among the investigators was Detective Greg Kading. It was Kading who came to the conclusion that Poochie was the triggerman in this case and brought his theory to the public in 2011 with his book, Murder Rap. Kading continues to push the narrative, to this day, that Poochie carried out the hit on the orders of Suge Knight. Murder Rap has since been turned into a documentary, and Kading has made numerous appearances on various platforms and programs. But exactly how was it that Kading came to the conclusion that it was Poochie? In his book, Kading goes on to reference a letter that was written by a Fruittown Piru Blood gang member named Roderick Reed. In this letter, Lil Rod named Poochie as the killer of Biggie, which raised Kading's antennas. Kading began to look deeper into Death Row Associates to get more information on Poochie. This led him in the direction of former head of Death Row Security, Reggie Wright Jr. Wright was one of the people who has long been suspected of helping to orchestrate the hits on not only Biggie, but also Tupac. In Kading's book, he details how it was Reggie who led him in the direction of Poochie, and also gave up information on Suge Knight's baby mama. Kading refers to her under the alias of Teresa Swan, though her real name is actually Tammy Hawkins. Reggie and Hawkins allegedly had a relationship that predates Operation Transparency. At one point, they had even been living together at the same address and allegedly had intimate relations.
You got to realize something. The reason that Suge Knight and Reggie Wright had a falling out was because Reggie was banging Tammy Hawkins. Reggie was living and renting an apartment with Tammy Hawkins.
Teresa Swan obviously was tied up with Suge Knight. I mean, you know, that much I know for a fact, okay? I have a lot of documentation. Of course, everybody always rationalizes everybody after the fact, right? But you see, Tammy Hawkins and Reggie Wright have a history together, okay? I don't know what that is. You can take that for whatever that means. That they had some intimate relationship. They were best friends, best buddies. They had a house together they got evicted from. Now, Reggie liked to say, well, I've just signed a lease for it and got her a house. And there's so much paperwork that ties it together.
He had a place with Tammy Hawkins? I mean,
they got evicted. I got the court paperwork. They got evicted from the same house. When they got evicted, you know, when you get an eviction.
They both was on the lease together?
Yes.
What year is this?
It looks like September 19th of 2001. There was an unlawful detainer, which you know that means. That means an eviction. The landlord's suing them because they didn't pay the rent. Okay? The landlord, Peter Dorkin, Peter W. Dorkin versus Reginald Wright Jr. He's suing Reggie for an eviction, and Tammy Hawkins is the co-defendant in that.
In the book, Dead Wrong by author Randall Sullivan, it details the various fraud crimes that she and Wright had been involved with together at different points. Reggie at one point even described her as a great lady whom he loves like a sister.
Great lady. I love her like a sister.
It's safe to say that Reggie basically fed her to Kading and his task force. After doing further investigation on Swan, Kading was able to figure out that she had numerous cases against her for forgery, perjury, and the use of fake identities. He used all of this information to build a case against her to put her in a compromising position and get her to talk about her knowledge of Biggie's murder. It was then that Kading typed up a fake confession letter that was meant to look like it was made by Poochie under one of his aliases, Darnell Bolton. From this point forward, according to Kading, after reading the letter, Swan told him that everything that was stated in the letter was accurate, and began to confess on how she hired Poochie on Suge's behalf after visiting him in prison. Kading claims that she confessed to posing as an aide to Suge's attorney while visiting him in prison, and says that he wanted her to get in contact with Poochie to take care of Biggie. Poochie then asked for $9,000 to carry out the hit. According to her, Poochie had a green Impala. After carrying out the hit, Poochie then asked for an additional $4,000 to leave town and lay low for a while. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is Kading's entire basis for his theory on Poochie killing Biggie. Now let's take the rest of the time we have remaining in this video to closely examine his theory and the many flaws, contradictions, and just flat-out lies in it. First, we need to understand exactly who Greg Kading is, and dig deeper into his background during his tenure as an LAPD cop. Many people actually don't know that Kading has a history of shady and questionable behavior, from bribing and coercing informants in different cases, to pointing guns at little babies, and admittedly using racial slurs while on duty. At one point, a federal judge who presided over a case that Kading worked on went as far as to say that Kading had a reckless disregard for the truth.
Well, come to find out, and I listened to a lot of the tapes of him and his informants. Why he taped himself, I'll never know. Because he's promising these guys houses and money and all these things. I need you to say this, I need you to say, and then I have phone conversations of the informant telling other guys, yeah, all I had to do, I have to say this, and that. I'm at 400 grand, I'm gonna get a $500,000 home, I'm gonna be living there, I'm gonna be living high on the hog, I'm gonna be doing it, bro, and all this. And I'm like, you can't promise people anything. You can't buy informants. You can't offer them anything.
In fact, the case that actually got him kicked off the Biggie Smalls task force was the Torres Ramos case. The same case where he had been accused of actually coaching informants and allegedly offering them money in exchange for their testimonies. Many people actually believe that this is the same procedure Kading and his partner Darren Dupree took when they interviewed Keefe D for Keefe's proffer session, which would most likely explain why Keefe is currently proclaiming his innocence in the Tupac case and claiming that he wasn't even in Vegas the night Pac was shot. But that's a whole different topic for another video. But it certainly begs a question. Is this also how Kading was able to get a so-called confession from Tammy Hawkins? As stated earlier in this video, Kading essentially fed her the story of how Poochie allegedly killed Biggie with a fake confession letter he created. Is it possible that she went along with whatever story Kading wanted her to go along with so she could avoid charges? Keep in mind, once Kading got this alleged confession out of Hawkins and was kicked off the Biggie case, nothing was ever done to follow up on these claims. Also, Poochie had already been dead for a few years by the time all this information came out. Yet, to this very day, Kading is confident in this theory and continues pushing it to the public as if it's irrefutable.
Poochie is conveniently dead, so we can't really question him about any of this. The case was the word of one woman who had obviously made a deal to get out of going to prison for other crimes. So she had every incentive to tell a story that Kading wanted to hear.
As I mentioned earlier, Kading published his book and came out into the public in 2011. By that time, Suge Knight was not yet incarcerated. If Kading really wanted to protect his informant in this case, why was he so quick to write a book and continuously go on major platforms on TV and online promoting his story? If the theory that Suge had Biggie killed by Poochie with the help of his baby mama, concealing her identity to Teresa Swan, wouldn't help her case at all. Suge would have known who she was without question.
Like, I'm not gonna be emotional. I'm not gonna say a real name, Teresa Swan. I'm gonna stick with that. Why protect her identity but not Keefe D? They both been on the proffer agreement. Why protect her but not Keefe D? And then on top of that, before you go, Craig, you're giving out this info. Suge will automatically know who's giving out this info. And like, all right, she got like lawyer privilege to go in there, and this went down, this went down. Like, if Suge is a smart man, he's like, all right, that's, you know what I mean, Teresa Swan. Automatically like that.
Kading never even considered putting her in witness protection. In fact, he argued against it in his book. Common sense would have told Kading not to bring his Poochie theory to the media. At least not until some charges were brought up against Suge. But instead, he writes a book and promotes the story on every major platform that would have him on, as if Suge Knight doesn't have easy access to the media. In his book, Kading claimed that before he was thrown off the Biggie case, he wanted to make attempts to wire Suge Knight's phone and have him communicate with Swan to elicit incriminating information. However, years after his book was out, he began saying that a body wire was put on Swan, and she actually had a brief conversation with Suge about Poochie allegedly killing Biggie.
Get the wiretap from Suge, that would have changed the game.
Well,
right?
there was an effort, so they did put a body wire on Teresa Swan, and she tried to get Suge to make incriminating statements, but Suge was one step ahead of her. He sensed something was wrong. Why are we talking about this? Why are you bringing this up? You know,
yeah. He's
smart enough to know that there's no reason for her to be asking these questions.
Of course, there's no evidence to prove that a conversation of sorts ever occurred. But this is one of the first of many instances of Kading making contradictory statements regarding this case. Another major contradiction Kading has been caught in over the years is the confusion on the color of the Impala. Originally, when Kading first came out, in his book, he details and describes the car as black. There's no mention of the car being a different color or even a possibility of it being a different color. In fact, there's a line in the book where Kading states that he was definitively sure Poochie shot Biggie out of a black Impala. But it wasn't soon after his book was released that he began claiming in various interviews that the Impala was actually green. And in his murder rap documentary, he points to the witness descriptions of the vehicle as aqua blue or green. But in his book, one of the first things he claimed he did when he was assigned to the Transparency Task Force was read the book Labyrinth by author Randall Sullivan. There's a section in Labyrinth where it clearly lays out the main reason why a couple of the witnesses may have identified the vehicle as blue or greenish. The police realized that the 4 vapor lights that illuminated the shooting scene could have given a greenish cast to a black car if it was clean and shiny. Besides, Kading knows that some of the initial suspects in this case, from Keefe D to DJ Quick, all owned black Impalas. Kading even highlighted this fact in his own book. So why now does he constantly try and discredit Russell Poole for being suspicious of David Mack, who owned a black Impala? And why doesn't he hold the same position against the original investigators before Poole, who also suspected individuals with black Impalas? When Kading was asked about why his book made 0 mentions of a green Impala, he claims it was a simple typo. But this explanation doesn't make any sense. As I mentioned before, there is no mention in the murder rap book about the Impala being any other color besides black. In fact, the only witness statements included in the book are that of those who said it was black. Not even a single indication that the car may have possibly been a different color. If Poochie owned a green Impala, don't you think that would have been one of the main things elaborated on in more clear detail? I believe Kading changing the color of the Impala after his book had already been published was a clear, sad attempt by him to try and discredit Russell Poole and promote his Poochie theory.
The Impala then quickly makes a right onto Wilshire Boulevard. The security guy attempts to give chase, but Black Impala has disappeared into the night. Black Impala has disappeared into the night. Black Impala has disappeared into the night.
Now, suspiciously, that greenish Impala coincidentally just matches the description of the Chevy Impala that is used the night that Biggie Smalls is killed.
This next contradiction, made by both Kading and Reggie, basically shuts down this entire theory. Back in 2011, Kading sat down with Hip Hop DX for an interview. In those days, Kading was in his early stages of trying to downplay Gene Deal's identification of Amir Muhammad as the shooter by misrepresenting the facts, as usual. Gene has always maintained that a man groomed like a Nation of Islam member approached Puffy's car before the shooting, in which Gene then brandished his weapon, and the man walked away. In the interview, Kading stated that the man Gene saw was probably a lookout and not the actual shooter. Despite the witness statements and the composite drawings of the shooter, Kading ran with the narrative that the man was simply a lookout. The rep at Hip Hop DX then asked him if he believes Poochie was dressed in Nation of Islam attire the night Biggie was killed. Kading responded by saying, "No way." About a couple years ago, Reggie Wright Jr. responded to a user in the Bomb First comment section who asked him the same question. Reggie responded by saying, "No." He proceeded to say that no one actually saw the shooter, which is false. Here, Reggie is making the same argument that Kading tried to make by implying that the bowtie guy Gene Deal saw before the shooting was somehow a lookout. The fact is, the witnesses who were able to get a glimpse of the actual shooter all said that he had a suit and bow tie. In fact, it was Lil Cease who did this composite sketch for the police. In the murder rap documentary, around the 45-minute mark, they even provided the audio from the 911 call made from a passenger in Biggie's car. In the audio, the person says the shooter looked like he was Muslim. So Kading basically contradicted himself from his 2011 statement, and Reggie got caught in a lie. They more or less just admitted that Poochie wasn't the shooter. How can you logically say that you believe he killed Biggie, yet you don't take into account what the witnesses say the shooter had on? As of late though, Kading says it wasn't unusual for someone like Poochie to dress up as someone else to throw people off.
So, you know what? I'm gonna pivot in a different direction. Poochie, right? He was never placed at the scene. And you say he's known for being a shooter, being a hitman. When has he ever, dressed in a bow tie and a suit and all that to take somebody out? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I've had that conversation with people that were associated with Mob Piru, even members of the Mob Piru. And we also had police reports documenting that guys were dressing up in the NOI attire and going out and doing crimes, in particular like home invasion robberies. It wasn't unusual for them to pretend to be something else. Like some Bloods would do a drive-by. Now they say drive-by, doing a drive-by, they'll yell out Crips or throw Crip signs in order to give the people, to give the false impression of who it really was. And then we had some other information about Poochie where he was potentially dressing up as another individual in order to give the impression that it wasn't him. So it wasn't completely out of character, not only within the group of people that he would have been associated with, but for him himself. He was a smart guy, relatively smart guy.
While this explanation does make some sense, it doesn't change the fact that Poochie doesn't resemble either one of the sketches of the killer. And the fact that Kading already contradicted himself on this subject makes this explanation null and void. And furthermore, at one point, Reggie even took it a step further. He says that Teresa Swan told him that she's not even sure if Poochie really killed Biggie.
Any conversation I had with Teresa Swan, she's not 100% sure or convinced that Poochie carried out what he's accused of being done. She still say that to this day. That he could be just taking credit for something he didn't do. She says she don't know if he did it or didn't do it.
With the recent passing of Ms. Valletta Wallace, Greg Kading has been spreading more false information in another poor attempt to draw more people to his theory. In this recent video posted by its AGTV, which is a known murder rap propaganda channel, Kading blatantly lies on Ms. Wallace and says that she wanted to forgive Teresa Swan for her alleged involvement in her son's murder, implying that she believed and agreed with his conclusions on who he says killed Biggie. But the fact is, Ms. Wallace never believed nor supported the theory that Poochie was the one who murdered her son. In the book Dead Wrong, she's quoted saying that the only person she ever believed ever tried to solve her son's case was Russell Poole, not Kading. In fact, she portrayed herself in the 2021 film City of Lies, starring Johnny Depp. The film was based on Randall Sullivan's book, Labyrinth, which was based on Poole's investigation into Biggie's murder. Also, Biggie's former wife, Faith Evans, did an interview with the Huffington Post in late 2015. In the interview, she stated that she has a good idea who killed Biggie, and that she and Ms. Wallace know that justice may never be served. She follows up this statement by saying that it would be a huge financial case against the city of Los Angeles if justice were ever served.
Where, because, people have their questions, their assumptions, their thoughts, but, I just feel like, in our hearts, me and his mom feel like we know what happened, and we really feel like we know it may never be served. We know justice may never be served.
But what do you think actually happened?
Well, we know he was murdered, but we believe that the LAPD knows who's responsible. That's what we believe.
Do you ever think this will be reopened by the LAPD? Do you ever think that there can be a moment where they might put more emphasis on acknowledging this and finding the...
We would love for that to happen. I mean, there's been a few times over the years when we thought that might have been about to happen. But, I think that would be certainly a huge, not only a huge financial case against the city, but, it would have a lot of other weight, on them. So
As I stated earlier in the video, Ms. Wallace's lawsuit against the city of LA that was based on Poole's investigation would have resulted in her estate winning up to $400 million had she won. That would have been one of the biggest payouts made and would have likely bankrupted the entire city. The case was dismissed without prejudice in 2010, meaning that it could be refiled at a later date. But this dismissal came after the LAPD argued in court that the Operation Transparency Task Force's ongoing investigation into the case permits it to withhold evidence from the Wallace estate. The judge in the case ruled in the LAPD's favor. The only reason why Ms. Wallace's attorneys agreed to dismiss it was because they were frustrated by their lack of access to the evidence that had now been placed under seal. And to further prove that Ms. Wallace and the Wallace estate attorneys don't believe the Poochie theory, they openly called out Kading on numerous occasions. Perry Sanders was Ms. Wallace's main attorney who represented her estate in the lawsuit. He has been very vocal about his disdain of Kading for years. When Kading released his book in October of 2011, Sanders was one of the main people in the media who was calling him out for the misinformation and inconsistencies in it.
Well, but I heard something about, I read the LA Weekly that did a great cover of your story and of your book, that Valetta Wallace's lawyer did not agree with some of the stuff that was in the book.
Yeah, but unfortunately, and I can understand where he was coming from, Perry Sanders. Now, he has not had a chance to sit down and look at the evidence, to look at the documentation, to look at how we refute the basis of their theory, which was the involvement of LAPD officers in the killing of Biggie. So he hasn't had a chance to informatively draw a conclusion. I mean, he was basing his response off of a magazine article. Once he sees the evidence that refutes their position, I suspect he'll change his tune.
There's even a whole section in Dead Wrong where Sanders is quoted speaking about a meeting he and another attorney had with Kading in November of 2011. In this meeting, Sanders claimed that he challenged Kading's theory by asking him tough questions that Kading apparently couldn't answer. According to Sanders, at one point in the interview, Kading essentially admitted that the whole reason why the Operation Transparency Task Force was even created was to find some other theory of who killed Biggie that didn't implicate police officers. Kading even revealed that the task force was actually disbanded almost immediately after the Wallace lawsuit was dismissed.
Sanders had compiled a long list of the inaccuracies in murder rap by the time he contacted Kading in November 2011 to arrange a meeting at the Hilton Garden Inn in Calabasas. The attorney brought along a new associate, a young lawyer from the Bay Area named Sandra Ribera. Sanders did most of the talking when their November 3rd meeting with Kading began. My main point, obviously, was to see what it was he'd done to supposedly eliminate cops as suspects in the Biggie murder, Sanders recalled. I went through it point by point, and he hadn't run down even one of the things I asked about. Not one. So when he says the first thing he did was absolutely eliminate cops as suspects by running down every piece of supposed evidence, that's a lie. It's a blatant lie. What was most interesting to him about the entire meeting, Sanders said, was watching the way Kading changed while he was being questioned. He started out with this sort of Boy Scout persona. I'm just here to help. But as I began to ask more and more pointed questions, he literally became a different person right in front of my eyes. I've never seen a bigger Jekyll and Hyde transformation in my life. He started out innocent and charming, but believe me, that went away fast when he was put under pressure. You could see the fury in his eyes. His face was getting redder and redder, and the atmosphere was getting more and more tense. Kading looked like he was about to pop at any second, so I took my foot off the gas and let Sandy ask some questions. Ribera had come into the Calabasas meeting with a far more sympathetic attitude toward Kading than Sanders had, as she recalled it. At least at the beginning. It was obvious that there was a lot he didn't know, Ribera said. The LAPD had kept a lot from him, including all of the informant interviews. He did know about Mike Robinson, and he admitted to us that Mike was credible, even though he had written exactly the opposite of that in his book. He hadn't gotten a copy of the Knox Declaration, and he wasn't given access to any of the stuff connected to B.I.G. So I was thinking, this poor guy doesn't realize how the LAPD pulled the wool over his eyes. Gradually, though, it became obvious that Kading hadn't really minded having the wool pulled over his eyes. He didn't get upset or pissed off at the LAPD when Perry told him all the stuff he didn't know, but he did get pissed at Perry for pointing it all out and telling him how little he actually knew about the case. I figured, okay, now this guy has a choice. Now that he knows how much of what he's saying is bullshit, he can go back and try to make it right. But Kading didn't do anything like that. He just stuck with the bullshit. Whether it was laziness or he doesn't give a shit, I couldn't tell you. What I really think, his book was out and he didn't want to deal with any new information. But saying he ruled out cops in the Biggie murder was disingenuous at best. He knew the LAPD was happy to have him out there saying it had been proven no cops were involved. They weren't going to make an arrest or do anything that would force them to produce evidence and answer questions. They were just going to wait for it to all go away. During the interview, Kading did reveal at least one significant fact that stunned Sanders. The LAPD had shut down Operation Transparency 1 month after the dismissal of the lawsuit. The strange thing was, Sanders said, Kading seemed to know that his so-called investigation had just been used by the LAPD to protect itself from our claim of cop involvement in Biggie's murder.
I mean, Kading says all kinds of shit that isn't true, so, you know, there's that.
Hey, look, Kading said he'd run down he absolutely rolled out ironclad cops before he went in another direction. When I got the interview Kading, before he had any idea what I was going to do, and I put him on the spot about tons of issues, he didn't run any of them down. He's a liar, man. Yeah. It's complicated. Yeah.
Lately, the murder rap camp has become so desperate to push their false narrative that they've even went as far as to fabricate evidence. Mike Dorsey, who is the director of the murder rap documentary, runs their official YouTube channel in which he uploads his deep dive videos on the murders of Tupac and Biggie. In episode 12 of Deep Dive, around the 9-minute mark of the clip, he highlights a comment that a random user made regarding Poochie and another Piru gang member named Chin Walker. This user was claiming to be a relative of Chin Walker and says that Poochie alluded to his involvement in Biggie's killing when Diddy's song, "I'll Be Missing You" came on the radio. But the fact is, anyone with a smartphone, laptop, tablet, and basic access to the internet can come on and say anything. People make things up on the internet every day. There's no telling who even typed this comment. I mean, just look. The page has no profile picture and looks like it was probably typed by Mike Dorsey himself. This entire comment screams bullshit. And besides, if this is actually a real relative of Chin, Murder Rap would have used their resources to track this person down by now and bring them to the LAPD as a witness to help corroborate their theory. After all, these are the same people who tracked down the Patton brothers for an interview in an effort to discredit the Tupac confession letter a few years ago. Greg Kading also claims that he keeps in contact with Amir Muhammad. So, if this comment is legitimate, then why have they not made any efforts to track down this so-called niece of Chin? Its AGTV even repeated this lie in his video on Poochie in an attempt to make the narrative sound more credible and legitimate. But meanwhile, when actual new witnesses come forward with insightful information that doesn't support their narrative, here they come trying to take jabs at their credibility. When Layla Steinberg, who was Tupac's former manager, came forward in Nick Broomfield's documentary, Last Man Standing, she says she knew David Mack very well and saw him and Rafael Perez the night of Biggie's murder at the Peterson Museum. To this day, there hasn't been any information that has come out to disprove that, and David Mack hasn't even sued her or Broomfield. But here comes Kading and Team Murder Rap coming to do damage control because their theory is losing its momentum. It's honestly pathetic, but I would expect this from people like Kading, Dorsey, and others who support them. Mike Dorsey is the same individual who was on Reggie Wright Jr.'s live show when Reggie was openly bad-mouthing Biggie. Around the 1 hour and 18-minute mark of this video, Reggie calls Biggie a fat MF and says he doesn't mind being accused of being involved in his killing. Dorsey clearly heard Reggie say this live and said nothing in defense of Biggie. And in this video, Reggie responds to those who accuse him of having a hand in orchestrating the hit. He says that even if he was involved in Biggie's murder, we're supposed to love him for that. Basically saying that if we're real fans of Tupac, then we should appreciate Reggie for having a hand in getting Biggie killed. It's very disgusting to know that a group of people who claim they solved the murders of the most famous rappers of all time have a close relationship with a person like Reggie, an individual who openly mocks and disrespects the memory of one of the victims of a murder they claim they solved to give his family closure. Do you guys seriously think that a group of people who have these kind of sentiments of Biggie are really going to tell you the truth about who actually killed him?
But nah, that's the thing, man. It's just like, yo, I just see the way Reggie talks about Biggie, man, the vitriol. Like, I don't see Suge Knight talk crazy about Biggie. I don't see none of the Dog Pound talk crazy about Biggie. I don't see none of the Tupac family talk crazy about Biggie. The only person that talks crazy about Biggie calls him a fat mother bleeper, you know what I'm saying? Call him a B-A-N, you know what I'm saying? He's talking about like, yo, if I did kill Biggie, wouldn't y'all be happy? Go to Bond first and see him. He talks crazy about Big.
It's crazy how much these so-called reputable media outlets have allowed people like Kading and the murder rap propaganda to constantly go unchallenged. To this very day, Kading and all the YouTube channels who help spread his falsehoods get all of the attention, while the truth gets buried underneath those web of lies.
He got some of these out there, and because it's different between a black man and a nigga gonna tap dance and do whatever he gotta do for you in order to put some dollars in his pocket. A black man gonna say, fuck you and feed you beans, nigga, I'm gonna lay it down like it's supposed to be, and I'm gonna tell you the motherfucking truth whether you like it or not. Got these niggas out here lying, saying this, saying that. Poochie ain't walked up on me. Poochie wasn't dressed up like no motherfucking Muslim.
So now, Vlad, I want everybody who's listening to me to go see that Tupac cover up. It talks about Greg Kading, Reggie Wright, people that worked with them, people that was around them, people that know them, and how Vlad has helped Kading and Reggie. Vlad has helped Kading and Reggie spread the poison, spread the lies, spread the bullshit about how Notorious Big got killed. He has used this platform to go against the truth, because on that docu-series, I think it's 6 parts, they tell how Kading is a straight liar, how a judge said he better not ever testify in court again. He better not never testify in court again. You said Vlad do know something. He knows he's helping Kading, he's helping Reggie, he's helping them niggas with them lies about Pac and Big's case. He know he's helping them because there are people, FBI agents, other detectives who are pointing the blame on Reggie and Kading, that he won't even have them on their show. Ask him why he never had Phil Carson on his show. Don, what's his name? Don Sikorsky, Don, Nikki, those people from the dossier. Why he never had them on? Because they refute all the lies that he allowed Reggie and motherfucking Kading to tell.
I challenge anyone to find me a clip or a quote from anybody who has ever said that Poochie killed Biggie before Kading came out with murder rap. The fact of the matter is, the Poochie narrative has always been false. It has no legs, and the person who brought that theory to the public has a questionable background himself. If Poochie really killed Biggie, then why is the case still an open investigation at the LAPD? Why would Poochie wait until the night of a star-studded event to kill Biggie when Biggie was in LA for weeks beforehand? Why is Kading so sure that his theory is correct when he can't even get any corroborative evidence to provide to the LAPD to make them close the case? Why did Operation Transparency get shut down just a month after the Wallace lawsuit was dismissed? Why does murder rap have a vested interest in discrediting witnesses and informants who have information that goes against their narrative?
I don't believe Greg Kading's theory that Poochie killed Biggie. I believe that Phil Carson's theory is closer to the truth, that dirty cops were involved.
Everybody wants that question answered. Was LAPD involved in this murder? Everybody wants to know that. Forget about, and I understand we all want to know who pulled the trigger. I get that. But everybody wants to know, was LAPD involved in orchestrating this murder? Now, if you want that monkey off your back in your LAPD, then why not be part of something? If you think Greg Kading's theory is true, then make it public and get everybody off your back and make this whole thing go away, that the theory of LAPD being involved is incorrect. The bottom line is they're not doing that, and the reason is because they know Greg Kading's theory is not correct. Period.
Then they killed Biggie. He just came through to visit. Rampart Division. Pyrus ain't had nothing to do with it. So